Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Susan Greeley. I'm the National Director of Wellness Services at Castle Connolly Private Health Partners, and excited for yet another wellness webinar. We're going to take about a minute or two to give participants a time to join in. So I like to just chat a little bit while that's happening as more people are logging in. I like to tell everybody there will be a Q&A as part of the webinar, so anytime during the presentation, do submit questions. For those of you who are joining me for the first time, I like to say that these wellness webinars are intended to educate and support all of our members, and it's with them that my goal is to inspire you and actually truly empower everyone to make positive lifestyle choices and yeah, to support your overall well-being. So that's, as we all know, even more important since COVID. Again, as people start logging in, taking just about 20 more seconds before we'll actually start the evening. And thank you for joining. So it's just after 6:30. Okay. I will go ahead and get started then. So I'm, once again, Susan Greeley, the National Director of Wellness Services at Castle Connolly Private Health Partners. And there will be a Q&A, so please submit questions at any point during this webinar. We're also sending out the recording as a follow-up on tomorrow. You'll receive that. And I like to say too, also, please do read that email. It contains some other very useful tools and information that we have put together for you. So do take a look at that. Thanks again for joining me. This is the SENS Wellness webinar on holistic approaches to sleep, particularly during these very challenging times. So many people seem to be plagued by having poor sleep under what I'd call normal circumstances, and that's exacerbated during these times of stress. So I see a lot of increased anxiety, perhaps some decreased activity for a lot of people, and I'd say some more relaxed eating habits are happening. That could even mean more alcohol comes into play, and all of this can contribute to just impaired sleep. So these lifestyle habits are extremely important these days, probably now more so than ever. In any case, we do all know the importance and how good it feels to get a good night's sleep for our overall health and well-being. So that said, I'm very pleased to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Michael Finkelstein. So a little bit about Dr. Finkelstein. He is also known as the slow medicine doctor, and he is the author of a book called Slow Medicine, Hope and Healing for Chronic Illness. It's published by HarperCollins, and it's endorsed by the likes of Andrew Weil and Dr. Oz. So Dr. Finkelstein was trained at premier institutes for both conventional and integrative medicine, and he's the recipient of numerous distinctions. He draws from his diverse medical expertise to offer both a micro and macro point of view on today's healthcare needs and challenges. Dr. Finkelstein provides tried and true solutions for healing individual patients and the medical system as a whole. He is the founder and medical director at Sun Raven. That's the home of slow medicine. It's a healing center located on a bucolic farm in Westchester County, New York. And he practices the principles of slow medicine there and supports a movement for higher collective consciousness for all beings. With that said, I'm extremely happy and excited to turn things over to Dr. Finkelstein.
Well, thank you very much, Susan and Sean, for inviting me to participate with you all tonight on a subject that I think is essential for all of us to think about now and then. Some people really have a hard time with sleep, and they know it really has impact in their lives day to day. So it's not a minor subject, yet compared to other diseases, heart disease, cancer, COVID-19, you know, sometimes those take top billing, and for good reasons. But there is a fundamental issue with regard to our state of wellness that will make any of those things more likely in our lives. And so I think most people understand that sleep is one of those things that is going to be useful. If we can improve the quality of our sleep, maybe we will be less susceptible to any of those other things. So this topic is really incredible. I'll share one thing before I go into some slides that I prepared for you, just to keep you engaged and something visual to look at other than me for the next 45 minutes or so, but and to help organize your own thinking. But I want to tell a story which was interesting on this subject. I graduated medical school in 1986. That's 34 years ago. And as soon as I graduated medical school, my grandmother, who was the one who really pushed me to become a doctor, her first question to me was, Michael, you're now a doctor. Can you write me a prescription for a sleeping pill? Because I can't sleep. And she was apparently waiting for a long time to get me to that state of my own career and development so that I can then help her with her sleep. I had learned in medical school back then that medicines, while useful at times, may not always be a good idea, especially for something that's a chronic issue. And so this is a long time ago now, and in a very conventional setting. Since then, I've learned a lot more about even holistic approaches to health and healing and understand the downsides, I think we all do, of medication. And most people would rather do something other than medication to deal with a problem such as sleep, but they're not necessarily sure what to do. So this is what I want to share with you today. I want to help you more than I was able at that time to help my grandma. So let's jump into the slides and let me sort of give you a little bit of my overview. The intention here is to walk you through some principles and at the same time weave in very practical understanding so that by the end of this 35 minutes of my talking, following which you'll have time to ask questions and I'll answer them. But my hope is that you could, for the most part, answer many of these questions yourself, that it becomes so clear and apparent what you need to do and what you can do. So that's my goal. So this is me, again, on my bucolic farm. It really is an incredible place. It's not that far from New York City. It's about 15 minutes. And I moved here because I realized for my own well-being, I needed to be in a place that was tranquil. And a lot of that had to do with how well I sleep here as opposed to in a place that's much more congested and busy. But we don't all have the luxury of an environment like this. I understand that. But I am speaking from this location today and would love to welcome you here to show it to you one day yourself. Let's talk about some obvious things for many, but I want to go through them to make sure we're complete. Sleep is vital, we know that. There's a number of things that we understand sleep will do for us. Most people know after a good night's sleep, they feel restored, they feel refreshed. And that when they don't have a good night's sleep, there's something about how their body functions on many levels, how their mind functions on many levels, that is a mild to moderate, sometimes more severe impairment. What happens when our eyes are closed and we're in different states of brainwave physiology is the cells of our body have a chance to do something they can't do when we're active during the day, and specifically when we're eating and ingesting food and nutrients that require significant metabolic action. And so this period of rest is a period of restoration. In addition, we can regenerate things during the day that have been, let's say, broken or used, sometimes overused. And chronically, when we wind up with any sort of sleep impairment, what we notice is that we feel older. You know, that's not necessarily all normal. There is a certain issue with aging and chronology, which we can't escape entirely. But some of what we're experiencing may have to do with the fact that our sleep isn't as effective, because at night, our cells, protein molecules, enzymes, enzyme systems, even the microorganisms that live in our body have a chance to regenerate. It's sort of the way a city operates at night, is people are asleep and the people come through the streets to clean them. And in the morning, you wake up and it looks much more orderly. Things are back in place. They should be relatively clean. That's what goes on for us as well. Specifically, just like the streets of a city, we need to take out the garbage. And most of what we are able to do in our lifetime to detoxify things that we accumulate in our lives, molecules that are broken, as well as what we ingest, inhale, or drink that are pollution of some form or another, need to be eliminated from the body. And most of that happens at night when we sleep. If we're active, our cells are in a different state of physiology. They're in a active, living assimilation metabolism, which is different than what it looks like when they're looking to break down old debris, remove it, clean it up, and restore it and detoxify it. We understand as well when all these things happen, the previous three, then we feel much more energized, and we feel like we can then deal with the next day. When we don't sleep well, we know that we feel as if our batteries are drained. Rejuvenation is something which is a whole nother subject, a whole nother talk one day that we can perhaps do together. But when people look at themselves in the mirror and say, gee, I look older, you could do that day by day and notice aging differently on different days relative to how well you slept. If you don't sleep well for a couple of days, you'll look old. This is not just what you see on the surface and in a mirror, but is what your cells look like inside as well. So this is an important phenomenon, and most of us do not want to age any faster than necessary. And so rejuvenation and youthfulness is a byproduct of quality sleep. Lastly, we not just recharge and rejuvenate, but our energy toward our goal. This whole idea of our lives that are being challenged in general on a day-to-day basis, including the challenge of what are we going to do with our life, we need a certain amount of positive mind for this. And in addition to the positive energy, the physical energy, we need a mental energy. And this revitalization word here really is meant to imply the combination of the physical and the mental revitalization.
Michael, excuse me, sorry, I have to interrupt one second. We don't see your slides.
Oh.
I apologize. Yeah, if you can.
Let me see if I can share better.
Okay.
Share screen.
Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I am so sorry about that.
It's okay. There we go.
Do you see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay. So
fantastic. Thank you.
let me go.
I'll mute myself again.
Okay, so we went through these. I'm sorry. So restoration, regeneration, detoxification, recharging, rejuvenation, and revitalization. And I will show you the slide of me at the farm, which obviously you didn't see. So I'm sorry about that, but I'll do that at the end, I promise. What interrupts our sleep? Well, this word, stress, gets 3 exclamation points these days because this is an unusual time. The title of this talk, Susan and I worked on for a while, our initial title for the program that was supposed to be held in person in June was changed to this date as a webinar because of the stress we're all under right now. And I can understand that most people perhaps are having more difficulty sleeping and sleeping well and feeling rested and feeling settled in any way as a result. But there's stress in our lives all the time. And so any type of stress, and stress is something essentially that overfills our cup to handle challenge, whatever that is. So every one of us has a different capacity. Whenever we feel flooded or overwhelmed, that's stress, and that stress is going to impair us. Now, there's a certain amount of stress, just to be clear, that may be motivating and somewhat beneficial. It gets us going. We understand there's a deadline. We understand that we have to do things. We may not like it. There may be challenges associated with it, but we have the capacity to handle it. We get it done. We feel accomplished. Those are the days you feel really good, and you probably sleep really well. But the stress that I'm talking about here is the stress that overwhelms us at any given point in our lives. If it's chronic, which a lot of people are dealing with, then in fact, we will find sleep much more difficult. And so stress is number 1. Food.
Oh, can you advance that as well?
I'm sorry?
Advance the slide as well. It's stuck on the Sleep is Vital screen.
How about now?
No, I think it's frozen. So sorry, there's technical difficulties. If hopefully nobody noticed, I actually got cut off my internet. It seems to be frozen. I apologize, Michael. There we go. Got it now.
You see the whole screen with the slides?
Now I see sleep interrupters, yes.
Okay, great. So food is the next important subject. What we eat has a lot to do with how well we're going to sleep. Of course, food has a lot to do with a lot of things in terms of our well-being. And so there is a science, you could say, to what kind of foods are required to deal with sleep, especially. And it's not a small subject. I will cover it though, I promise you. I'll give you more information about what is maybe the basics of a food approach to dealing with sleep. Alcohol is another one. Some alcohol may be good for the stress. It may be social. It may improve the quality of your life in other ways. But there's a point beyond which enough alcohol will have a serious effect on sleep. Alcohol, like other stimulants, like caffeine, which I'll talk about at another point in the presentation, have a withdrawal phenomena associated with them, meaning our body has receptors that like this stuff. We know what it feels like. Some of it is pleasurable, that's why we do it. But that when the dose of these drugs comes down because of metabolism, the receptors get hungry again, they start craving. And we know this because craving is a feature of an addiction. Now, I'm not talking about the types of addiction that get people into trouble. I'm not talking about a moral view on addiction at all. I'm just talking about physiologically. Even small doses of alcohol, small doses of caffeine could lead to a withdrawal phenomena, a physiological withdrawal phenomena. When that happens, you have a parasympathetic stimulatory effect. So most people are aware of, let's say, what happens to opiate addicts when they stop cold turkey. Their body goes into a state of hyperactivity. Their body temperature will rise because of the muscular contraction that results. Now that's an extreme state. It happens with alcohol withdrawal as well. Even though any one of us might be moderate in our intake, these phenomena still happen to us. You have to be mindful. So if you're not sleeping well, how much you drink, how much coffee, how many other stimulants you consume or are exposed to has an effect. And these are areas, I'm identifying these for you. These are all areas where you have a choice and you can improve how you behave, let's say, and what choices you make to improve your sleep. So it just may be a matter of priorities. Let's keep going. Aggravation. Aggravation is one of those things that we all understand. It's not the best time to be aggravated in the evening before you want to go to sleep. So if you have to be aggravated, maybe what you want to do is move it up earlier in the day. And I understand that most people can't always choose when they're going to be aggravated. But there are certain phone calls you do not need to make at night. There are certain news programs or other things you may listen to, watch, read that might be aggravating that you could choose not to do at a certain hour. And so I'm going to talk about those in more details as we get to the other half of this presentation, which is really what you want to do about it. But right now, I just want to list these things for you. These are the things that interrupt your sleep. And the last thing is aimlessness. If we're not sure why we want to be healthy, if we're not sure why we're alive and what we're doing here, we're wandering, we're just sort of going through the motions of life, that's a serious state of disconnect and disharmony. And that's an essential, deep-rooted feature of a person who tends to be challenged by sleep. It's really important that we know why we want to be healthy and what we're doing here. It's not an easy question, but it's part of what I do when I talk to my patients, clients about this work, slow medicine, which I'll share with you in a minute. But there's so much to understand about how these things work together. And having a clear understanding of what you're doing in your life is really important. So let me go to the next slide. So why do you want to sleep? And again, this is the question. You want to sleep, you want to feel better in the morning, you want to have a good day, you want to, not get a disease like I just shared with you that you might be susceptible to. Well, the point is, after those are done, what are you doing with your life? Why do you want to have energy? What are you going to do with that energy? And so this is that essential question. And so what's really important is that you take care of yourself. The key is that you understand all of yourself is part of this equation. I am not going to be one of those doctors who's going to give you the medication, like I did with my grandmother. I'm not going to give you just a simple supplement to take as if that's all you need to do, because in truth, I don't believe that. I don't mind giving some medication for some people at some time, and I don't think that supplements are all bad. But there is a core understanding of how we take care of ourselves that's essential to just being well in general, and specifically to sleep. This is what it looks like for me when I talk to people about what is a healthy person going to need to think about in their life. You know, we have our body, of course, we spend a lot of time with, and we have our mental emotional state, but it also includes our relationships to other people, ourself, the natural world, the divine, our communities, and ultimately our life's purpose. Like, what are we doing? This is what I call the slow medicine wheel of health. And when I speak to people and they help them in general to take better care of themselves, I ask them a number of questions. This is what my book is predicated on, to take an inventory of how am I doing in those different areas. And this relates to sleep as it does to anything else. When you think about your day, or any day, when have you slept the best? When you think about your life, it's those days where you feel fulfilled. You had a good day, you were active, you did things that were meaningful, you were with good people, you didn't have a lot of aggravation. If you had stress, you got through it. In general, you were achieving something toward your life purpose. Relationships often are the sine qua non of that. So you just had a good day as far as all your relationships, the people you live with, the people you work with, your neighbors, the community, the world at large was just having a good day, and you slept like a baby. Well, that's what you want to model going forward, because that's ultimately how you're going to handle your sleep on a day-to-day basis. You're going to try to create the best possible day every day. So the key to restful, restorative, rejuvenating, revitalizing sleep is found in the quality of your day. So I assume this is not only being recorded, that perhaps you can get these slides. You can certainly reach out to me if you want, but this would be one I would put on the mirror in your bathroom. And when you wake up in the morning, this is what you see. And when you go to bed, this is what you see. And therefore, what I'm going to talk to you now is about how your day can be organized and composed to provide yourself the best chance to not only sleep well, but to have the next day be as good as the previous. And therefore, you start changing the flow and the cycle of your life to something that's far more better. So I know you want to sleep better. And this is not just so you can say, I sleep, I check the box, but so your whole life is better. Again, this is what that looks like. This is what you're striving for. You're striving for a wheel in balance. You don't have to be perfect in any one of these areas, by the way. You just need to be solid in them. So it does require a little bit of an inventory. So let's talk about sleep hygiene. A lot of people have heard this phrase, but just to be clear, it's the program that you go through to help yourself sleep. So think of a baby. Think of a little child. Some of you have had them, and you understand how vital it is to ritualize a ritual of activities, a sequence of activities, I mean, starting in the evening, perhaps around dinner, that between dinner and when you target them going to bed, you do the same thing at the same time every day. And if you break that cycle, your child does not go to sleep so well. And then the next day is very challenging. Well, you're not that much different than a child in terms of these needs and in terms of what works. So just like you might feed a child at 6 o'clock, you may, do something like play with them for a half an hour, then you might read them a book, then you might put them in a warm bath, and then you may read to them again, and then you may coo with them, you may cuddle with them, you put them in a warm bed, you make the room really dark, and then you quietly leave the room. And all those activities, as you just have heard and recognized, gets quieter and calmer as you progress. Well, I would suggest you think the same thing of yourself for your own day, starting with dinner. I'm going to actually make the case later on that it actually starts when you wake up. But the key is the sleep hygiene rituals have to do with this order of your day's activity. So let's talk about them. So stress. These are the same obstacles that I shared with you earlier. So it's better to have activity during the day in natural light. If you don't go outside every day and you're in indoor lighting, then this gland in your brain, the pineal gland, which produces melatonin, a molecule I think a lot of you have heard of, doesn't work as well. It needs natural sunlight to be activated, and the contrast of the day and the night need to be pretty dramatic. So I'll talk about how important it is to sleep in a dark room, but the first part of this is to be outside during the day in the light, every day. It's so essential. Other things you can do to deal with stress, of course, are meditation, writing, emoting, sharing your feelings, therapy if necessary. But to keep stress bottled up, especially as you get toward the end of the day, is a good recipe to be charged up and find it very difficult, to be very restless in the mind, to try to go to sleep. So think about how you handle stress. Again, a subject for another talk altogether, but it's so essential, not something you can just skip over. You have a lot of stress in your life. You cannot assume that all these other things are going to be enough. You need to deal with stress, and you need to do probably better to deal with stress. There's no way around it. Medication, just as an aside, could help you forget your stress. But of course, the medication has significant downsides. So you want to be very careful about that and the dependency. And I think, quite frankly, if you can handle stress holistically, you're not only helping the stress quotient, but you're really making a big improvement in many other things in your life. Food, as I signaled earlier I would come back to, here's the simplicity of the food. Eat less, eat earlier, and think about intermittently fast, which means you eat 2 meals a day and only eat between a window of, let's say, 12 noon and 6 or 7 p.m. So just don't eat so much, so many times. The subtext here then is also what you're eating. And there are certain foods, particularly foods that are glycemic, meaning they produce a rise in your blood sugar levels, that those are going to be a little bit more stimulating as far as your metabolism is concerned, and therefore may put you on a roller coaster that will make it challenging to sleep, or have you wake up hungry, and even in the middle of the night hungry, because of the way your blood sugar can go up and down. And just as an aside, this is such an essential feature for health and well-being. Again, the subject for a whole nother conversation. But eating less, eating earlier are two very important things. A big meal at the end of the day is not going to help you sleep. Similarly, alcohol at night is understandable that so many people do it and prefer it, but the amount is really important. I would say 1 glass of wine is okay. But for many people, the second glass of wine or anything more than that, or the second drink, is just going to impair their sleep. And so if you're one of those people who are listening and you know that you're not sleeping that well and you want to change this, then I wish I could tell you something different, but it's not going to be easy if you're consuming that much alcohol in the evening. By the way, I'm not suggesting you drink alcohol in the morning, but it's something that I think you understand the point. Many of these things I wish I could change. I wish they weren't the case. I wish you didn't have a sleep issue. But since you do and you're listening, these are the answers. I can't gloss over them, and I can't sugarcoat them, unfortunately. Stimulants, the same. Caffeine, supplements, and other drugs can be stimulating, as well as this emotional stuff called unfinished business. If you're dangling with unfinished business, whether that's literally your work, your livelihood, or emotional stuff, it's going to be hard to rest, as you know. So it's important to compartmentalize your day's activities and do your best when it comes to the evening, especially, to make that time like you would treat a baby. It may mean waking up earlier to do some of this stuff, but your preference, for the sake of your well-being and health, at least my recommendation, my advice would be, sleep is your priority. Aggravation, evening conflicts, aggressive people, noise in the news are things we could choose to avoid. I know it's so tempting to watch television or listen to the news or to get in touch with other people, and this is when you can do it. I mean, we're working during the day often, other people are working during the day. This is the time when we can socialize. My suggestion is just do it earlier and try to avoid those things that are really acute and inflammatory. And lastly, to deal with aimlessness, this is a question for you. How will you have a good day? What would a good day look like for you? What will be meaningful for you? If you did many of these things, if you took this advice that I'm recommending, and tomorrow you did these things better, not perfect, just better than you did today, you would feel good, you would feel positive. Then you connect that dot to the spirit of the intention behind all of this hard work and the discipline, which is I'm going to do something really important with my life. That's why I need this energy. That's why other people are relying on me. I have relationships that matter. I want to be there. And so this sleep is not just for you, but it's for everything you touch. And it's so vital, and you're so worth it. One final point on sleep hygiene is what you do during the day is directly proportional to quality of your sleep. You heard me say that, and when you do it. So this is, again, the thing that I want to emphasize. And what you're doing during the day starts in the morning. Again, getting outside, waking up, being active, taking care of business during the day. It starts then. But the evening ritual, you could really put in place. You can eat dinner at a certain time, let's say 6, maybe a more ideal time than later, and eat lighter. And then you take a walk after dinner. And then you read something interesting and quiet. And then maybe you take a hot bath or a hot shower. And then maybe you write a little bit, or you journal, or you do something like that. Maybe you talk to somebody you love that is going to give you a good feeling. Then you close your eyes and you go to bed. That would be my suggestion. Treat yourself like a baby. 2 last points. One is your bedroom. These are things you can do and take some work, take some discipline. But you don't want to overlook maybe one of the most obvious things to think about, which is the room you're sleeping in itself. There are things that could go on in that room that make it much more difficult. That even if you did all those other things I just recommended, that you might find that you're still not sleeping well. So the first thing I hear from people is that their body hurts. They have aches and pains. They're trying to find a comfortable position. Or they maybe fall asleep, but because their hips bother them or their back, they wake up. This is when people reach for medications. Pain relievers is a common one to help sleep. And I understand that. But therefore, the focus here is keeping your body in shape. It's helpful to reduce those aches and pains. So staying active, doing stretching in various ways to keep your body limber and flexible, taking care of those aches and pains, not overdoing it, being consistent. This is what I mean by keeping your body in shape. What you eat, again, is part of that, and is a specific subset of what you're going to fill yourself with. But I think, a bloated stomach filled with food is certainly not a comfortable position to be in. So the first thing is your body and the aches and pains. Sometimes a hot bath with salts can be soothing. A hot shower, going from a hot shower into a cool room, a cool bed, could be really soporific. That word means helpful to sleep. And so if you have access to a bath with salts, that's wonderful, a shower. Sometimes just getting into a cool room underneath the covers is helpful in that regard. And so there are many tricks, but this is, again, what you would do for a baby. So think about yourself. There are essential oils, lavender, sweet melissa. These are essential oils. Sometimes a drop or two in the bathtub or even in a spray bottle in a shower that you breathe in could trigger a deep part of your brain to go into a sleep physiological state. So tricks like this are worth it. Beyond that, your bed itself could be probably more comfortable. So there's the mattress, there's the temperature of the room, the temperature of the bed, and there's the blankets. Susan passed along a question to me earlier in the day about weighted blankets. And some people do sleep better with some weight on them, or they need weight on some parts of their body and sort of a light touch on others. And so there are ways of configuring your blankets. Maybe you have 2 or 3 different blankets with different weights. I know that sounds maybe crazy, but that's far better than medication. And I think it could be worth a try. So all these things, you might consider the mattress, you might flip it over if nothing else. Sometimes if it's not a mattress that has one side of sort of foam and the other side of springs, if you can flip it over, sometimes just doing that is useful. Or putting the head where the foot is and the foot where the head is, just rotating it. Our mattresses get grooves, and sometimes that position is not particularly helpful for sleep. So try these things. Nothing to lose here. No expense, really, to speak of. Two other points related to electronics. One is just the fact that they're by your headboard. Television itself could be maybe across the room, by your head, or lamps and clocks, maybe other things. You plug your phone in to charge. These electronics all emit electromagnetic frequencies, and those can seriously impair your sleep. Some people are much more sensitive than others. If that's potentially you, unplug everything around the headboard of your bed, plug your phone in elsewhere, or charge it and turn off the receiver at night. I know that's not always easy to do. You need to be in touch with certain people. But the closer those things are to your head, the more difficult it's going to be for your brain to get into those brainwave physiological states that I referred to earlier. Similarly, the Wi-Fi networks are a significant amount of electromagnetic radiation. I am one of those people who is very nervous about 5G networks, just as an aside, another subject. But I'm not going to overlook in my explanation to you and to share this detail that if you're having trouble sleep, it may be worth just turning off your Wi-Fi for a couple of nights and seeing if that makes a difference, in addition to some of these other things. And lastly, here on this subject, dark rooms and eye masks are conducive to sleep. Light is not, except that you do want light in the day, so that this contrast of light in your eyes during the day and a really dark bedroom will help you with regard to the production of melatonin and sleep. And so that brings me to the final slide in terms of the content here, which is on supplements. And they can be useful. I don't argue with that. Melatonin being one people often talk about. But they will not compensate for a life out of balance. And so you can take all the melatonin you want. I mean, worth trying perhaps, but it's not likely to be sufficient for most people. So I would say supplements are supplemental. They're supplemental to be added to the foundation of this work, which is taking care of yourself, having a good day, thinking about your sleep hygiene ritual, and then to ultimately be able to live in a harmonic, balanced state where the activity is done at the right time, the sleep is done at the right time, and you get all the benefits of sleep that I alluded to. Okay, so that's my presentation formally. I am going to invite your questions. But before I do that, I want to show you this slide about where I am, because that was probably not seen. But this is my farm, as I mentioned earlier, and this is my contact information. Please reach out to me if you have specific personal questions. It is my pleasure to follow up with anybody that has been on the webinar tonight. In general, for first-time callers, I offer 15 minutes without charge, and I'm really happy to speak to people, to get to know them, and to see if I'm a good fit to be of support on this subject or any other. So thank you again. And Susan, I'll go back to you. I'll stop sharing my screen so you can
start the Q&A. Thank you. There was so much valuable information there. So this is really, even I'll go back and listen. Great questions are coming in as well. So I'll just dive right in. One person says, and I think this is going on with a lot of people, they've gotten into, during COVID, into this habit of taking an afternoon nap. So they've gotten into this rut of taking the nap and then not being able to sleep at night. Do you have any suggestions on how to get out of that rut?
Yeah. So I think the first part of the answer is to think about, well, why are you napping? And I know the obvious answer is I'm tired. But there's probably something deeper than that. There's probably an exhaustion. It's different than the type of tired you have after you, let's say you do a lot of manual labor. There's probably a significant mental component to this, where I'm just overwhelmed. I'm just got to shut down, right? So that may be what's motivating people to take this nap these days. So then, if that's the case, then think about the other ways you can handle the overwhelm experience, other than turning off and sleeping. One of them is just some activity, physical activity. Now these days, getting outside is not as simple as it used to be. But just taking a walk outside, if that's available, is not a bad idea. Opening a window in where you live, and if you can face the sunlight and breathe fresh air, sometimes is part of it. If you have an animal, play with your animal. If there's a number of different things you can do. There's music you can listen to. There's guided meditations, and there's imagery. There's art. There's journaling, and there's meditation. Any of these things could be practical substitutes for sleep, for this overwhelmed state. I think any of those and many of those are worth trying and to incorporate regularly, whether it's this particular type of time or not, because we're almost always under a certain amount of stress. And those things I just mentioned help us alleviate stress, which is so important to many other things about our lives anyway. Failing that though, let's say you do some of those things and you still need to close your eyes, then the amount of time you sleep is maybe what's the issue. Maybe you want to take what people might refer to as a power nap and try to limit it to 20 or 30 minutes. That might not feel like enough, but often it is, so that it's not much longer. If you take a nap during the day and you have a dream, that means you've entered REM sleep. That means you've actually bitten off a whole sleep cycle. And that may make it much harder for you to actually do that at night when it's more desirable. And it can be strung together with several other sleep cycles, and yet you have that quality restful sleep. I hope that answer helps.
Oh, that was extremely helpful. Also, the whole time I was thinking how it also applies to myself, and trying all of those is very valuable and helpful. And then when you do succumb to that nap, I will say what I do, which is I set the timer on my phone for 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm all about the power nap when it's needed. And you hit the nail on the head there with the exhaustion. It's very different right now, I'm finding, and I hear this from a lot of members, that it's this mental exhaustion. So thank you. I thought that was very helpful. Okay, so what are some of the best things to eat? I guess throughout the course, it doesn't specify the time, but best and worst things to eat. Perhaps at dinner, I guess.
Nutrition is one of those things, and Susan, is better than I perhaps, about how long you can speak to somebody, sort out all the information that people really do need to understand so that they can make good choices. But the simple, approach to think about is the need to keep your metabolism in somewhat of a steady state. The roller coaster ride that we go on when we eat foods that are particularly glycemic means that our blood sugars rise quickly, our body produces insulin in response, drives the blood sugar down, blood sugar dips below a certain amount, you feel hungry again, and that happens, as we know, with foods that are sweet, as well as foods that are in the family of complex carbohydrates, starches, breads, cakes, cookies, chips, pasta, things that are flours that have been reconstituted, basically make life harder, not only for sleep, but for many other medical conditions, inflammation, and all these chronic diseases that people want to avoid. So it's really important to understand what it takes to have a steady state metabolism. There are a lot of ways to hack that, and I use that word intentionally. So there are, ketone diets, ketone producing diets, and there's fads, and there's understanding about protein and fat now that I think are very important, relatively complex subjects. But those are ways to hack this. But it's not a no carbohydrate diet, but a smart carbohydrate diet is what I would say. And for that, at night, bread, cakes, cookies, chips, pasta are the things I would tend to avoid at nighttime. Juices, sweet foods, even artificially sweetened food, still sweet to taste, and your body responds by the sweet taste buds on your tongue by producing insulin no matter what happens. And in fact, it's my understanding, and what I recommend is diet beverages are worse than sugared beverages from a metabolic point of view. And so a lot of people understand that. They drink tons of diet soda, still have more weight than they want, their metabolism is not good, and they ask why. And that diet soda, which is sweet, artificially sweetened, albeit, is still affecting their insulin metabolism, and that has impact in their lives. So I would eat less. I would eat a meal with a high quality protein and fat, and not as much carbohydrates, specifically starchy carbohydrates, which include root vegetables and any processed grain.
I concur. Thank you, particularly at that dinner meal. And then that also will lump the alcohol, or more than a moderate amount of alcohol contributes to
Yeah.
the same effect. Okay. Yeah. And then I just wanted to bring that tied into the point about intermittent fasting for diet and people with diabetes in particular. That was a question. Can
Yeah.
you reconcile that? How do they
Yeah.
manage?
So look, diabetes is a very important condition that you can't play around with. And so I want to be very mindful of that. This is when you really need probably individualized advice. Part of which, in my mind, my relationships with people, I really want to understand how motivated somebody is and how much discipline they're going to be able to muster to organize themselves. But I will tell you that I believe people with non-insulin dependent diabetes can get their blood sugar to normal with lifestyle changes. Almost all of them can. It just depends on how motivated and disciplined you can be. That may be a very rigorous diet. It may be a very, very low carbohydrate, low glycemic diet. It may be very little food, frankly. But there's a way, I believe, to reset a metabolism. If your pancreas is working at all, I think there's a way to be able to bring this back in alignment, if not off medications altogether, but close to it. And I think the people who are really motivated and disciplined can intermittently fast safely, but they would then need to be taking their blood sugar quickly, frequently. They need to be in touch with their prescribing physician with regard to the medications they may be on to adjust them if necessary. But it's not something I would do independent of advice. But I do think it has a lot of potential.
I'm going to apologize for some background noise here. Okay. No, that was very helpful. So can you address the conflict between wearing a CPAP mask and good sleep? Apparently, a lot of people who wear the CPAP don't have good sleep.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense, putting an apparatus on your face. People are troubled by simple cloth face masks these days on the street. Thinking about putting a solid mask on your face with a strap behind your head and trying to sleep restfully, I wouldn't be surprised that most people who wear CPAP masks have a certain amount of difficulty sleeping restfully. Of course, the reason they're on a CPAP mask is because of sleep apnea, is because of the low oxygenation that occurs, unconsciously while sleeping, which is really detrimental to well-being. I would back the question up then to, well, why do I have sleep apnea? And if I could address the sleep apnea more effectively, then I can get off the CPAP mask, and then I don't have to worry about the CPAP mask being a problem.
Right.
But then, just like with the mattress, maybe there are different types of CPAP mask devices that you could try that some might be more comfortable than others. And given how important this is, and I know there's expenses involved with it, and sort of a hassle, but this is a high priority. This, to me, I would go after this. I would try, think of how many people spend, long time buying a single pair of shoes because it has to fit well because they're wearing them every day, right, and they're doing a lot of walking or something like that. And the boots or the shoes, depending on their job, need to be right. And they go through, days of trying things on and whatever. And to sleep every night for 365 days a year, I can't think of anything more important than making sure the CPAP mask is as comfortable as it can be.
Makes complete sense. Thank you. So important. Okay, we have a lot of people who have trouble falling asleep, and then there's a whole lot of people who wake up at almost consistently, either 3 hours after falling asleep or at 3 a.m. The three seem to be very common. Yeah. So that's a twofold. So in trying to fall asleep, why do some people, I've had a couple of them say they need the television, and then those who wake up in the middle of the night are asking, how do they get back to sleep, or why do they fight it? Should they stay up then? And
yeah. Well, so same way I answer most questions. Let's go to another question, which is, why do I need the television? And why am I waking up? Not what to do when those things happen, but why. And so
why?
The television often obviously provides some white noise, a distraction. And so what do you need to be distracted from? Well, if your restless mind is in general the answer. And so how can you soothe the restless mind? I'm not sure keeping the television on is the worst thing, I can think of, but maybe get a white noise generator instead and seeing if that's sufficient, because I don't like the fact that the television is on with its electromagnetic field, and it's putting light in the room. So I think I would try a white noise generator, seeing if it drowns out some of the ambient sounds outside your house or apartment and maybe is inadvertently keeping you awake. But then I would address my restless mind. Journaling before you go to sleep is a great way to do that. Dumping it all out, writing the list that sometimes a lot of people replay in their head of the things they need to do tomorrow, putting that on paper, not right before you go to bed, by the way, but maybe an hour before you get into bed, a little earlier so it's not fresh on your mind. Then do something like take a bath or read something quieting, but that you've already dumped that stuff out of your mind. And then meditation, I think, is a very powerful tool. A lot of people poo-poo it. A lot of people have tried it. A lot of people have not tried it seriously enough. I think it's a real go-to when it comes to this. The second part of your question was when I wake up several hours after falling asleep. That is almost certainly a symptom of withdrawal phenomena. If you drink alcohol, you will wake up between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And if you wake up between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, it's certainly due to the alcohol. And this is how long alcohol takes to metabolize in your liver and for those levels to come down and for your body to crave it. Not that you're craving it like an addict, right. But that your body notices the difference and would rather have those receptors filled with their substance of choice. Caffeine is like that a little bit. So caffeine in the morning, which a lot of people say, well, I drink only caffeine in the morning, but the withdrawal for caffeine is about 12 hours later. So let's say you have your caffeine at 8 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning. Well, then it's about 8 or 10 o'clock at night where your body is starting to go through that withdrawal. And sometimes not sleeping well at night for caffeine drinkers has to do with the morning coffee or tea. So this is something I would experiment with, anyone who's asked this question or has this issue. Cut out the caffeine, cut out the alcohol, see if it still happens. If it still happens, then I would look at your food. And if you're consuming sweet stuff at night, desserts, sweet food, supplemental meals after dinner, eating too late, that's the other problem. And so you could be hungry. Your body blood sugar may have just bounced below a certain amount, and you're getting the stimulating, seeking phenomenon of your brain. And so food is the next thing to go to. And I think those are the most likely. Next on the list is your body hurts in some way, and that I would go to the mattress and the blanket and the temperature in the room and those other points that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. Well, these are all helpful. There are so many specific questions still regarding diet. I'm going to try to touch on most of them, and I'm just going to interject here. If we don't touch on it, any of our members can reach out to me at any point as well for health coaching, even if it's just a quick call to answer a question. So that said, one person asks about back to the glycemic index, as she can't fall asleep, she finds that having a piece of toast does the trick.
So again, is sort of an indication that her blood sugar needs to be moved around a little bit for her to feel comfortable. And that probably means it's gone down as a result of her insulin pushing down the blood sugar that was released from her last meal. So I would look at what that last meal is, try to modify the last meal so it's not as glycemic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. And okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit to, I'm like, which one? They're all important. So supplements, just really quickly, does taking melatonin long-term cause insomnia? And does it make the body decrease its own production of melatonin over time? It's a 3-part question. And finally, are there any side effects to consider taking if you take it on a daily basis?
Yeah, melatonin I think is very safe, okay. Short-term, long-term. There's even a great capacity for tolerance of a dose. Melatonin, just as an aside, is very important for our immune system. There are medical studies that show that the incidence of certain cancers are lower with people who have higher levels of melatonin and sleep better. whether that's naturally produced or supplemental, and that more melatonin is produced when we sleep in dark rooms and follow the protocol that I've outlined. It's not going to impair, unlike sleeping medications, your natural ability to sleep. It's probably going to enhance it. And the fact is that as people age, they produce less melatonin sort of as a normal thing. So as people get past the age of 30 or 40, their melatonin levels trickle off quite a bit. And so I like melatonin as a supplement, quite frankly, but I like to think of supplements as supplemental. I'd like you to make more of your own melatonin because it's then being made at the right time, in sort of the right, method, in terms of you're doing it because it means other parts of you are in better balance. So get outside, get natural light, sleep in a dark room. But taking a supplement of melatonin, to me, is not a bad idea. Now, melatonin, just to be clear, comes in a lot of different forms. There's tablets, there's sublingual melatonin. I generally recommend sublingual melatonin. I think that it's better absorbed, it's more reliably absorbed. And the key to taking melatonin is to probably take it earlier than most people think about. So it's not right before you go to bed that you want to take melatonin. It's really around sunset that you want to take melatonin. And so this time of the year, the sun's setting at 8:30 in the Northeast, but in the winter, it'll set at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. So that's when your body would naturally start making melatonin. Part of the issue we have is how much lighting, artificial lighting we live with. So we live in homes that have electricity, and we have bright lights everywhere. That's not helpful. One of the things I didn't mention is dimming the lights in your home, and that will help your secretion of melatonin and do that. But taking a supplement of melatonin is something that I often recommend either for sleep or for its immune system effects.
Okay. Thank you. So does it help to have a sun lamp in the house? And these days that people aren't getting out early in the day, would that be helpful?
Yes. I mean, I think that, there's some studies that indicate that you could have full spectrum lighting of varying forms. And if you have to be inside as much, then that might be a good move. And that will move things in the right direction. There's other benefits of sunlight, though, and fresh air. So it's not, and that's why, all of my talk, I understand when people talk to me, because I've done this for a living for a long time, that I'm throwing a lot of things at once, but I'm trying to paint a picture that is, by definition, holistic. These things are interconnected. It's not just a simple pill. There's not a simple solution. And by the way, even if all of this worked and you were really healthy and you were really sleeping really well, I would then go back to that other question, which is, well, now what are you going to do with your life? Because that's why you want to do these things. It's why you want to not be aggravated by sleep or stress. You want to get on with your life and have a good one. And so that question looms large in our lives. And it's not just about fixing the body. It's about connecting the body to that intention.
Right. I couldn't agree more. That's fabulous. Okay, for plenty of women out there, we've had this question asked several times as well, kind of perimenopausally, definitely in menopause. Do you have any recommendations for helping with the middle of the night hot flashes and middle of the night waking?
Yeah. So if that happens, of course, it doesn't happen to all women, but it does happen to many.
To many. Mm-hmm.
But when something doesn't happen to everybody, you then are forced to ask the question, well, why is she not getting this experience?
Right.
And now one simple answer, which is always makes you feel better, is that it's genetic. But that's not sufficient. There are other things about how people live in balance or not in balance that will make a difference as far as hormones and neurotransmitters are concerned. They are connected to this very intricate system of our microbiome, the gut organisms that live with us, and also organisms that live on our skin and in our airways, our nervous system, our immune system, and our neuroendocrine system. Those are really tightly and intricately connected. If a woman is experiencing more menopausal symptoms than she would like, she should think about her gut. She should think about the microbiome in her gut and how healthy that is. That then gets into the subject of food, and it gets into the subject of the natural environment that she is or is not
in relationship with. I live and work on a farm for a reason, because I believe a farm with a garden with healthy soil is the best environment for this microbiome. And I bring people here to my office on this farm because I want to give them a dose and inoculate them with these microorganisms that happen to reside with me. Not because I want them to get freaked out of the germs, but because very strongly that that's a big part of the answer to many things that ail people. And menopause, this is where I would look first. So it's another subject, Susan, one day, maybe you and I can do another program on that subject, because it is so important.
I agree.
It's got a lot
It's so important.
of nuances.
I couldn't agree more. Right. And we could talk for hours just on that and the gut microbiome but the more information about that, the better for people. And it comes together the more frequently you hear that, I believe. And yes. I just have to interject my comment about the picture of you at the farm, at the garden. I'm so envious of that garden. So I will become making a tour.
Right.
And it is a simple thing. That's like one step that it's tangible. People can start to plant their own, even if it's just fresh herbs. And I put that in my recent newsletter. And there's so many benefits to herbs. You don't have a lot of space that you need to grow those. Right?
Yep. And I think the other thing is basically forests,
yes.
Just natural wilderness, and in Manhattan, in other cities, in certainly areas where there's any recreational park. I mean, these are habitats that are generally unspoiled, that have these microorganisms in the air.
Right. I'm so excited to talk about that more. I do want to be aware of the time. It's just after 7:30. I want to ask a couple more questions and then maybe 5 more minutes and we'll wrap it up, because it's just so helpful and important. I do want to go back to the 5G comment. Somebody asked if you could elaborate, and I think that was a little interesting and concerning to others. So can you just elaborate on the negative effects of a 5G network, if you want?
Our body is very sensitive to electromagnetic fields. And if you think about it, it makes sense. We have this physical body that seems like it's really solid, but it's really made up of all these smaller cells that actually don't touch each other. There's a space between all of our cells called interstitial space. I like calling it these days the extracellular matrix. And essentially, it's an electrical conduction system that helps our body cells communicate. It's not our nervous system. Our nervous system is another pathway of a conduction system, more like wiring. But there's this conduction system that exists all around every single one of our cells. We have 45 trillion cells. And by the way, we live with hundreds of trillions of organisms that also communicate in this network. Well, organisms are sensitive to electromagnetic fields. There's polarity and there's other effects. So when I was talking about Wi-Fi, when I was talking about this basic, electricity circuits in our house, we can experience them on ways that our physiology is subtly affected. Up to a point, it'll be very subtle. Beyond a certain point, when the X-ray or the radiation, it's not just X-rays, but the radiation frequencies are intense enough, there's more effects. And those effects can involve how the nucleus of those cells work, and meaning what they tell the cells to do, how our proteins are produced, whether our body can restore or regenerate. And Wi-Fi networks have been demonstrated to cause significant cellular communication damage. 4G is already difficult. 5G is a much more penetrating dose of electromagnetic radiation. The reason people are touting it or marketing it is because it can go through solid walls and solid objects. So you can be in a
Think about that, right?
Reception, or you can be in a crowded stadium with 70,000 people and nobody hogs up the frequency because it's so intense. Or you can be in a subway and listen to your 5G, or you can be in your, in a home apartment building, which usually doesn't get good signal, and you get good signal. Well, why is that? Because the signal is going through the walls now. The signal is so intense, is so high frequency that it can penetrate. Well, if it can penetrate a wall of concrete and a subway, it can penetrate your body. And so this, and any effects it may have, will just be accentuated. I'm nervous. I don't think there have been adequate studies. And then I would even question some of the science, I'd hate to say, because there's so much of an agenda in selling these products. I also know on the other side of it, there's some better communication to be had with these things, and there's an upside. But in general, I want to have a balanced and informed understanding before I make decisions. And this seems to be happening before we all have had the opportunity to be informed properly. And we see this now ubiquitous in our socio-political networks, where with this COVID thing, who do we believe? Who do we trust?
Right.
I would say the same thing applies for 5G. I'm just nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of satisfied with the way my 4G is working right now. And I don't know if I want to go any further, even though there are times I drop the call and I'm aggravated. But maybe this time is helping us understand we can live with time. We benefit from some extra time. Frankly, that's what slow medicine is all about.
I love that. It's so true. And it does give us pause. It gives us a lot to think about. And that's very important. It is thought-provoking. It also, at the start of that answer, I just want to mention that I think it's worth another webinar itself on the whole interstitium as an organ system. So we'll follow up with that. Okay, don't let me forget. So I think it's fascinating.
Yes.
Right? Okay. You know what? Because of time, I'm just the final question, and I apologize to anybody if we did not get to touch on your question. However, the last question of the evening, if somebody has been on sleep medication for years, do you have any advice on how to wean them?
Yeah. So it's not going to be, I don't usually advise people to just stop it. But I do like the idea of starting to incorporate the suggestions I've made. And once you feel you've got them well in place, and I would say a fairly rigorous discipline, if your motivation is to get off medications you've been on for a long time, then for you it may be a little bit challenging, but get into the discipline of a real sleep hygiene ritual. Eat earlier, eat less, and then put yourself to bed like a baby. Change your bedroom, with all the things that I recommend. Don't short sight, just don't limit yourself to do all these things, because they're all practical and doable. And then maybe start breaking your tablets down so that you're taking, 3/4 of a dose for a while, and then take half of a dose for a while, and then take 1/4 of a dose for a while. And when I say a while, maybe for a couple of weeks at a time, make those moves very gradually. And if you find that you get stuck at a point, ramp up your sleep hygiene ritual. Think about your diet. Think about what you do during the day. Do more journaling. Do more meditation. And then start again trying to taper. If the taper takes 6 months, it takes 6 months. Don't worry about that, but I think it's a worthwhile goal. And if you can achieve it, by the way, not only will you be sleeping better and off of the medication, but that means that what you've done for the rest of your health has been amazing. And that's why the advice I like to give is the advice that is good for everything. And if I can give you advice on that, then your risk of heart disease and cancer has also just come down. And so I can't think of anything better as a barometer for how you're doing than to use sleep.
Fantastic. Okay, such great advice. I can't thank you enough for being here tonight. I want to just quickly summarize 2 things, key takeaways that I heard. It's sleep hygiene starts in the morning. It starts with that morning routine and lasts throughout the day. And I think that is extremely, once people start to really focus on that, starting the best day and modeling that best day every day, starting in the morning. And the second thing I want to say is put yourself to sleep like a baby. I love that. So I definitely think we will need a follow-up to this. And I just want to thank you again, because this was
such a pleasure. And I know there was, more than 100 people on the webinar, and more people will get it. So it's very meaningful to me to be able to talk and work with people and share what I've learned. I'm happy to debate any of this, by the way, because I think if we can do this together, we're stronger. And so thank you very much for including me.
Completely agree. Thank you again. And I want to thank everybody for participating and joining us tonight. And I hope to see you again soon. So stay safe, everyone. Have a great evening. Okay, good night.